Welcome back to another episode of Uploaded and Unfiltered, the podcast in which I, your host Jermaine, interviews another content creator in regards to their journey thus far. You have reached the 52nd/53rd episode of the podcast. It's been a year since I started this podcast, and since the birth of this podcast on July 9th, 2023, I have hit every week of uploading an episode of the podcast. I can't say that I'm surprised. I am very grateful and humbled and happy as hell that my plan worked. This consistent streak that I have today is what I wanted, is what I set out and intended to do when I first started. And here we are, a year later, 53 episodes in. And the reason I was able to do this, I am going to share with everybody. We're going to get really in depth of how the podcast works, what my mindset is in regards to getting guests on and splitting up the workflow. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to creating a system. So before we get into it, I just want to thank everybody who has found the podcast either organically or have seen me tweet about it or seen me post about it in my streams. I truly appreciate you listening. Thank you. I could not be here without you. Although, let me be real. If nobody was listening to the podcast, I still would be here because the intention was to set that routine, get into that mindset, get into that workflow of doing it weekly. And I was able to achieve that. So again, I'm about to drop some knowledge for everybody. The system I'm about to drop, I believe you can replicate and do it elsewhere. That's my plan going forward. And so let's just go ahead and get into it. So you want to be able to stay consistent on a weekly basis or whatever metric you decide to give yourself, you need to create a system. You need to create a routine. Having a routine takes away all of the choices we have to make when it comes to content creating. And having a bunch of choices can lead to fatigue. I don't know if you ever been in a situation where someone's like, hey, what do you want to eat? And there's all the restaurants in the world for you to choose from. That is a fatiguing choice for most people. Most people can't just be like, let's eat steak. And you know what? Those people who can, who are quick and decisive, you have a skill set that you should cherish. But for the other people who hem and haw over what they want to eat, that is a fatiguing choice. The same thing happens in content creation. So when you create a system, when you create a routine, it takes that piece of the stressor out of the equation. So how do you go about creating a system? For me, when I first started the podcast, I sat down and I said, okay, what do I want the podcast to be? So whatever your situation is, what do you want the system to replicate? I wanted this system to allow me to create a podcast, invite people on it, upload it, get it uploaded to YouTube, and do some promo on it. So my system had to take into account each component of the podcast. And so before I started anything, I still have the notes when I roughly broke down all the components of the podcast. Over time, that list has grown and has been altered to reflect what truly is part of the podcast. And even when I was doing notes for this episode, I thought of a piece of the podcast, and y'all are going to probably laugh at this. Like, really? You didn't do anything with that? But I have a reason for it. A part of the system that didn't exist until now that is going to let me go forward with the second season of the podcast with some direction, some more strategy to grow the podcast and get the numbers up so I can affect more people and we can get more people out of stuckness. So these are the components of my system. I'm going to read each component and then give a few components that are in that piece, and it'll make more sense once I go into it. So essentially, all of these things that I'm going to mention are the podcast. They equal the podcast. The podcast is not just this episode, but the podcast is everything that it goes into creating a podcast. And when I looked at it that way, it allowed me to create a system around it to got me here a year later, posting an episode a week without any issues. We went on vacation. There were times where I didn't have any guests. I had a contingency plan for everything. There were the best parts are when I had an episode uploaded like 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Those times were great. going forward, that's what I'm going to strive for the rest of this podcast existence, is being like 2 or 3 weeks ahead. So if something comes up, I don't have to fret over posting an episode. I know something's in the chamber and it's about to go live. So back to it. The components of my system. The first component that starts off this thing is the invite. Typically, I like to have guests on my podcast to dive into their creative journey so we can hear their mindset, hear their lessons learned, hear things that they wish they could have did differently, or things that they would definitely tell people to do before starting this journey. So the invite starts off my journey. I usually reach out either via Discord if I have their name in Discord, or social media, mostly Twitter, because that's the easiest to DM on. I don't really DM on Instagram. I should probably figure that out and do that. But it usually starts with a DM. Hey, my name is Jermaine. I do X, Y, and Z. I'm a fan of your content, because everybody if I had on the podcast, I've seen their content. So I was somewhat familiar with it. And I would love to you be a guest on the podcast, uploading Unfiltered. I give like a 1-sentence description. It's a podcast where I talk to other creators about their creative journey. And then if you're interested, I got an invite for you. It goes into more of the podcast philosophy, the flow of the podcast. It has some links to get started, to schedule an appointment, and then we were good to go. With that spiel, most everybody is like, yeah, let's do it. I'm ready. And as I'm going over the components of this system, I'm going to give them some more little life lessons that are attached to these. The invite taught me how to reach out to people. It taught me that when I reach out to people, they're not saying no to me. They're saying no because they don't even have the time. Or even if they do say no, like, nah, I don't want to be in a podcast, which again, nobody has said yet, that it has nothing to do with me. I don't have to take it personal. Just shoot your shot. Simple and plain. Like, I'm asking this year, I'm asking everybody. I want more artists. I want more musicians. I want more painters, digital painters. I want to step outside of streamers and TikTokers and expand what we think of as a creator. So the guest list will expand in the next year of this podcast. So the invite has taught me that just shoot your shot. You ain't have nothing to lose. So some of the components that are tied to my invite, I use Canva to create the invite. I use Jotform to grab any information that I need for the podcast. So Jotform is a place where you can create a form, have a questionnaire, and get some information from your guests before they get on. My typical questions are, I need pronouns. I need what you want to be called on the podcast, things you don't want to talk about on the podcast, picture for the album art, give me your social medias, which one you wanted me to talk about the most, things of that nature. Oh, and the awesome thing I do is I have them write their own bio, because twofold. One, I want you to give me the best version of you, and it gives them practice on bragging them about themselves. You wouldn't be surprised about how many people do not like talking good shit about themselves. So that gives them an opportunity to do that. So once I have all that information, it gets saved in the Jot form. I just created a link. Right now, that Jot form is getting put into a Google Doc, so it gives me access to it. It saves that information because I'm not paying for Jot form. I'm using the free version. Going forward, my wife gave me this awesome idea, and I don't know why I didn't think about it beforehand, but I could just create the form in Google, and it'd probably be more flexible. It'd probably be cheaper if I have to pay anything, and it'll automatically go into a Google Doc, or I can export it out to a Google Doc relatively easy. So going forward, I might switch that over to Google Forms, but regardless, I think everybody who has a podcast or has something that they want to have people on, have guests on, should invest in creating a form that you can fill out so you can get some information. I'm telling you, that information is priceless, and it helps the flow of the podcast. Other things I use in this section, social medias. I'm going to start using Instagram a little bit more. Calendly is what I use for my scheduling program. And Discord is my main source of contact. But I think I'm going to invest in looking into WhatsApp to broaden my communication horizon. So, second component of this system is the episode itself. For me, all my episodes have been remote, so I'm recording in a studio that I invite the guest onto. I was using Podcastle, I do not like podcasts. So honestly, I don't remember what those reasons were. I just remember it was a headache to get each episode up at the beginning. Sometimes episodes were getting chopped up because they didn't get recorded correctly. The very first episode, shout out to the Homer Bomber Tank, got ate up all kinds of crazy. And so I still want to have that man on here to do another episode so we can have a real convo. And that's the plan. Maybe when I do my first video podcast, I'll have him do it since he was like the first guest, if he's down to do that. Anyways, right now I use Riverside FM. Love it. I have the ability to stream to various websites, including Twitch, if I want to. The recording has been smooth. I think I can have up to 4 guests, which I will be utilizing going forward with the podcast. And overall, the audio I get out of it is great. Most importantly, it allows me to download the audio raw for me to go bring it into my editor of choice, which is Ferrite, another program that I use in this part of the system. I use Ferrite on the iPad. If you edit audio and you have an iPad and an Apple Pencil, editing on the iPad is the most fun way to edit audio. I don't give a shit what anybody says. It's just a joy to edit my podcast on my iPad. I have a 12.9-inch iPad Pro. It's great. Anyways, what else do we use? Google to send out emails, Canva to create the album art, Calendly again to get the invitation and the schedule going, and Jotform is where I grab all of that information in regards of the forum and put it into the show notes and stuff like that itself. Third section of this system is the promo for the show. This is where I edit sections out of the podcast and create a little 15 to 50 second clip for TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. I need this section. I'm looking to see if I can streamline this. I actually was able to with Riverside. They automatically clip clips. That sounds weird. They cut clips from the podcast that are great for social media. There's just a little bit of tweaking that I do to it because I don't like the way it looks when it first comes out. But with that, I was been able to cut down time on the promo that I want to do for the podcast, also increasing it because I was only doing 1 a week because I was lazy, if I'm being honest. Now I'm striving to do at least 3 a week. And with the video ones, if the guest is cool with doing video, those have been the most engaging, but the audio ones have been dope too because I'm doing different things with the background. I have the album art, which is usually one of my dope ass guests. And so that grabs people in, and then we got words going. Anyways, promo for the show is getting worked on, but I like where it's going right now, thanks to Riverside FM. I use DaVinci Resolve for my editor, so I edit a clip in there, get that thing going. I throw it into captions. I used to throw it into captions when I needed captions. Riverside actually does captions as well. I also use Canva again to create some of the art itself. I've also started uploading the podcast to YouTube as straight audio because Google Podcast has gone away. YouTube has implemented a section where it actually pulls in podcasts. So if you have a podcast, uploading to YouTube is relatively straightforward. I actually change a few things, so I make the process a little bit, but it's cool. It only takes like 10 minutes. I edit the episode, the album art, or the thumbnail. I do that in Canva. I change the description and I add some icons to highlight some of the paragraphs. I then add in the person's social media, and then I usually tag them if they are on YouTube. I'll tag them as well, so they'll get that. And then I do all the keywords. Thanks to, again, Riverside, I can just pull keywords from there, plop them in. I usually will make my own keywords depending on what the episode was about. And then I do all the other stuff. You got ending, screen, titles, and all that fun stuff. And then I'd upload it. Once you upload it, the cool thing about YouTube Short, you can relate a YouTube Short to a video. So thankfully, any YouTube Short video I upload, I can relate it to the episode itself. And that has been good for growth. Like, that's been very helpful. I think that is it on the YouTube side. Once that's uploaded, I update the website. I have a website for the podcast uploaded in unfiltered.com, I believe is the URL. I am currently uploading every past guest, the album art, as well as a link to whatever social media they decided to be their primary. And I should be keeping up with that weekly. Going forward, I will be keeping up with that weekly. I'm also doing a blog on each episode for the website to increase SEO. That has been something that I will definitely be tackling more going forward. It was something that came, I want to say maybe a month or two ago, that I thought of the idea and I was like, all right, let me start implementing it. Then I went to a podcast meetup, and he was a social media marketing expert for like X, Y, and Z companies. And he was just like talking about how to get your numbers up. And he was like, yeah, if you don't have a blog, you should be getting a blog. It's relatively easy marketing. You don't have to pay any money into it unless you don't want to write it. You pay somebody else to do it. Anyways, all that to say this, there will be a blog on the website going up as well. And then the part of the system that I have neglected up until now is social media in general. So when it comes to social media, I have been counting the promo as my social media for the podcast. And that is unfortunately not the way I should be doing this. So my goal going forward is a hefty 3 times a week post on social media. And I just need to decide what I want my social media persona to be. I definitely want to be very encouraging. I want to be very inspirational, but I also want to be fun and lighthearted and engaging. Like, I don't want to be seen as just the positive mindset, woe is me type dude. Like, I want to be seen as, yo, I have no worries in the world because I don't worry about what doesn't pay me. I don't worry about what doesn't sustain my soul, what isn't good for me to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have given up those worries about, oh my God, what's going to happen in the future? Like those thoughts, I used to remember having those thoughts about worrying about future events. And now the thought of doing that, it makes me laugh. Like I can't even do it. I can't worry about shit that doesn't either hasn't happened or has already happened. If it's not happening now, you're not going to catch me worrying about it. And it's such a freeing feeling to be in that mindset. Like that's what I want to portray on social media. And that is what my goal is with my coaching business, is to get people to think that way. I'm not saying believe everything I believe, because come on now, there's years upon years of things that people believe, and I'm not trying to combat that, but I 100% am trying to combat what we think. Like just think like this with me a little bit, even if it's just on this one subject, and let's see what it does for you. That has me excited. So going forward, social media will be a part of the podcast, and I need to get on it and do it correctly. So I'm excited to start that. So once you have your system in place, all of those sections I read off, the invite, the episode itself, the promo for the show, the YouTube assets, the updating of the website, and now social media in general, you want to create a task for each of those sections of what you do in those sections. So as you're doing it, you can just check it off. And then once it's all checked, you check that whole section off and you move on to the next one. This portion is, I believe, what has provided me the success I have seen thus far in regards to posting consistently with the episode. I have never made a system like this for streaming or YouTube or TikTok. Those have very much been, unfortunately, off the whim. Like I'm feeling it today, I'm posting 3 videos or I'm getting 3 out. There was every once in a while, like when I do my advent calendar videos, when it's 1 a day, those are a challenge. And like when I get into that rhythm, and I just need to remember this, when I get into that rhythm, it just goes. And I don't know if it's busy for you, but Decembers are usually busy for families. And like I'm still able to bang these out 1 a day. I can't believe it took me this long to create such a system, but I really wanted this podcast thing to work. And all I could keep thinking was what would successful Jermaine do? What is successful Jermaine doing when he is thinking about his podcast? Oh, he probably has a system set up so he doesn't miss anything. oh, he's probably doing X, Y, and Z. And I was like, you know what? All the things that I could do right now, because there's some things that I want to do. Like, I don't want to edit the podcast anymore if I don't have to. Like, if I have enough money, like the podcast is making money and I don't have to edit the podcast, I just give somebody my vision and that vision comes out. I'm doing that. That gives me time to go do other cool, dope stuff. So that's going to happen. And social media for the podcast, I want to like just shoot a video, shoot that off, and somebody bust it down to 3 and knock it out for me. Like those things I'm not doing right now because I don't have the podcast is not making the capital that it needs to for those things to be a reality. But I can create a system, and that's exactly what I did. So each system gets its own task, exactly what you're going to do in those tasks. So you have something to check off and know that you did this thing that was supposed to be done. So I use Notion to capture is everything. All my notes for the podcast are in here. All my notes for my business are in here. Everything that like I'm making notes on is in Notion for the most part. And if it's not, it's getting important in here. I love how easy I can section things out. I love how easy I can just bust out an idea and it gets captured. I love how searchable it is. There's things that this program does that I have not tapped into yet, but I do plan on in the future. So Notion, amazing. If you haven't heard of it, go check it out. But the other thing I use, and this might be an iOS, Mac OS only type thing, so figure out which one you want to use, but I use Things for my task creations. Things is an app on iPad, iPhone, and on Mac OS. And unfortunately, it's not a universal app. So if you buy it on your iPhone, you still got to buy it on your iPad and you still got to buy it on your Mac. But when I tell you it is worth it for me, because it does exactly what I wanted it to do. I know reminders, you can create task lists and you can put a due date on it. And you could probably even like have them, once you close it, it reopens a new one. But in Things, the way that it's laid out, I can have this bucket being radiant reflection, that's my business, and then I can have task under there. And this other bucket, I can have family and have task under there. And this other bucket, I can have uploaded and unfiltered and have task under there. And then, so I can set those tasks to be due either today, someday, or whatever date in the future, and have them repeat once I close one. I have a template for, let's see, podcast to episode, start to finish. That's a template. Podcast to YouTube. That's a template. Podcast to promo. That's a template. Invite guests to podcast. That's a template. And which in each of those templates is 6 or 7 tasks that I need to knock out. So whenever I start a new template or a new project, I just say, oh, what are we doing today? Invite guests to podcast. Boom. I copy that one, start a new one, set that date to today, and then I put in whoever I'm trying to invite in the top. So it says like T-Pain / invite guests to podcast. And then everything that I need to do to get T-Pain on the podcast. Yeah, I'm talking this into existence. T-Pain's going to be on the podcast. I haven't started that work yet. There's no task that says that yet, but there will be, and we're going to make it happen. Anyways, and I think this is the magic that has kept me going for this year is I'm able to replicate this routine that has become easier over time. I know what I'm going to do each week. It doesn't feel like work. And because I have no choice, I have no choices to make. I have no decisions to make. I just need to see what the tasks say, do the task, and then check it off. It gives my brain this nice rhythm of things to do. So when I'm editing the podcast, I like that rhythm. It feels good. So I get into this like edit flow when I'm just like, slash. And with the pencil, I'm telling you, with the pencil, it's so much fun because it feels like you're just like writing out music or something. I don't know. It's just, I feel like a wizard when I'm doing it. Anyways, and that's it. That has sustained me thus far. Is it perfect? No, of course not. But has it gotten me this far? And do I plan on replicating this for YouTube videos, for TikTok videos, for ideas that I have in the future? 100%. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to probably PDF it and I'm just going to provide it to people. I'm like, hey, listen, this is how you create a system. This is the benefit of creating a system. This is psychologically why you want a system and why you want to create a routine for yourself. Go ahead and be successful. Again, I'm excited to be here. the next iteration of the podcast. I don't know when that's going to be, but video is definitely going to be a part of it. But more social media presence, more of us talking about our mindsets, more of us talking about our beliefs, more of us just dialing in what it is that makes us us. Because again, I believe wholeheartedly the best content creators are those who are being their authentic selves and are unridden from these weird societal pressures that are been put upon us. I think that type of creator can do wonderful, amazing things. And it is my goal to shift the way we think about ourselves. Like, I'm excited. With that, we're done. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Again, if you don't already subscribe to the podcast, go ahead and do so. Upload it in Unfiltered. You can find us everywhere. Just do a search and I'll pop up. Go ahead and subscribe. Leave me a comment. Send a message to the show. And if there's any guests out there that you would love to hear on the episode, go ahead and send me the information. I will do my due diligence and reach out to them. I mean, if they're a good fit. Other than that, again, everything that we think comes to fruition. If you put your mind to worrying about things in the future, then your whole reality is going to be filled with worry. But if you look towards the future with some excitement for what you're going to accomplish, I guarantee you things around you in the present start to seem much better. It starts to seem way more rosier. And you start to enjoy stuff a little bit. Seek that out for me. All right, as always, protect your mental, keep creating content, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Peace.